What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in. Today I got my homegirl, Lady Santos, in the building. She is a social justice and race equity advocate, Dominicana from NYC. You already know. Here to talk to us about the facts and the gems, all about racial equity, what it means to be Dominican, what it is to go through the journey of the curly hair journey. You already know. Tune in, like, subscribe, all of that. Share to your friends because you're about to get massive value. Lady, what's up?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for joining the show.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to talk about everything that has to do with who I am. And seriously, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So a little bit about Lady, she's from Harlem.
Yes,
right. How you said it earlier?
Harlem.
Huh?
I'm from Harlem.
All right. Bet. And, working in the NYU-ington, you know what I'm saying? Yep. Big university institution out here.
I work for NYU.
You went through your own journey with curly hair.
Yes.
I want to definitely learn and share about that. And being a Dominican and identifying as being of African descent and really caring about social justice and education and your whole trajectory within that. Let's go into all of that.
Let's do it. I'm ready. I'm absolutely ready to talk about all of that. Yeah.
So, okay, let's just start with that in itself. What do you identify as?
Yes, I think that's such a great question. Recently, I've been, in the past 3 months, I was identifying myself as Afro-Latina. But I follow a woman, her Instagram is She Is Mela, and she brought something up that was very important to me. And she mentioned how lighter skinned Latinas who identify as Afro-Latina are actually erasing and negating the actual meaning of that word, which is women that have really their physical features, like the color of their skin, it does identify as African, right? It shows up as African. So for me, it was very difficult to kind of navigate that because I do want to celebrate my African roots. I do want to say that I'm an Afro-Latina because when you look at me, you don't see whiteness. So for me, it was very difficult to read that, but I realized that it's because of the privilege that I hold, right? As a light-skinned Latina, yes, with curly hair, with kinky hair that exemplifies are my African roots. I realized that was my privilege speaking, and that I was not claiming Afro-Latina because I do know how I'm erasing other women experiences that do experience what the Afro-Latinos and Blackness experience in the United States. So for me, it was very important to distinguish that. So now I identify as a Latina woman, yes, but also Latinx woman of African descent. I know I have African descendancy, and for me, I want to showcase that because part of our life was meant to kind of erase that from us and take that away from us. They tried to erase us, but for me, I'm claiming that because part of me, that's who I am. So I showcase that everywhere I go.
That's super interesting because I've literally never heard about that perspective.
Right.
Yeah, and I've always spoken about the subject. By the way, we did not plan the whole burgundy crema thing.
I'm glad you're making this clear.
Yeah.
Because I really don't want people to think you're that type of corny. You know what I'm saying? For your podcast, you know what I'm saying? No, this was not planned. You did not tell me to match with you at all.
Yeah, this was.
We don't know how this happened.
Yeah, this was definitely a major coincidence, and it stands out even more on camera.
It does. It looks perfect though. It looks really good.
Yeah. So okay, cool. So that brings question, even within myself. You know what I'm saying? Because I've researched this whole topic. This is something that we don't get taught in schools.
Right.
And through my journey of researching this actually happened. I remember one time I was at my neighbor's house. He's African-American, but he's light-skinned African-American. Mm-hmm. And I remember he had 2 friends over, and it was a girl and a guy, and the girl was like, my friend said something, and she was like, but he's not black, he's Spanish. And then my friend, he's older than me. He's like probably like 5 years older than me. And he was like, "Oh, this young brother, he's a black brother. Dominicans are black." And I never really thought of that at that time. You know, when you grow up in the hood,
You really don't think about that.
you know, in these streets.
Yeah.
I said streets with a K.
Got you. Got it.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I've always heard myself being identified as a Spanish person. Right? Obviously, when you start learning more, you start knowing that Spanish are people from Spain.
Exactly.
Right? Things of the nation. Obviously, we have part of that is a part of us as well because of the language and the history and things of that nature. But it's interesting how you're playing a twist on the whole Afro-Latina to, I don't know, I'm just Dominican or Latina with African roots. Well, considering that, would you consider everybody that speaks Spanish throughout the world, I guess besides people from Spain, of African roots as well? Because I know most people from Central America, South America, and North America were, you know, a lot of Africans came through slave trade and things of that nature.
Yeah, and I want to clarify that Africans did not come to the Caribbean or Latin America. They were enslaved. They were forced to come. So I like to use that term as enslaved Africans because that's what it was, right? And I think it's so important to understand that the reason why our African brothers were enslaved was because they strategically enslaved peoples and nations from different villages, right? So they all spoke different languages. So it was very easy to kind of like group everyone together and kind of like bring them, kind of enslave them and force them to go through the transatlantic trade and go through and come to this side of, which is America. So I think when we talk about that, we've always been categorized like that in groups, in massive groups, in like this person and this other category without really thinking about the different layers that fall within that. So when I think about being Latina, I think about, yes, I'm Latina, but I'm from the Caribbean. And even the term Latina, if you think about it, is also problematic. And I think that the way that we've come to identify ourselves has been how the United States has identified us, and it comes from racism as well, right? Because Spanish, right? Oh, they speak Spanish, let's just call them all Spanish. And when in reality, there's so many layers to that. So, you know, what I'm trying to get at is that category where I don't consider everyone from Latin America to... Not that I don't consider them, but I don't think that everyone from Latin America considers themselves from African descendancy. And I think that's important to signal because we have to understand that it is a mixture of races, right? When we think about that, that's what comes up.
Okay. Yeah. And just out of curiosity, when we even think about identifying ourselves as a specific type of race, let's say within a survey, obviously there's this option of nowadays of being multiracial. But apart from that, because like with me, I mean, I'm a tiny bit darker skin than, like definitely like, let's see, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I'm still like very light skinned, but I'm still definitely not 100% light skinned.
Right.
So it's like this confusion or this like ambiguity.
Right.
Even though like somebody looks at me and they already know I'm Dominican.
Right.
Because I look like a plátano.
What do you mean you look like a plátano? Please tell me how.
I don't know. I don't know, but everybody never considers me anything but Dominican, which is I don't know. I got the OD Dominican features. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
It's probably my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know.
It's interesting you say that, but I think that all stems from racism, right? Like people trying to categorize and put you into a category. And I think in the United States, there's something called the one drop rule, and that's something that I learned in my socialism class at the University of Albany. And basically, what it said is that the one drop rule, if you have any type of blackness ever in your lineage or it shows up in any way, that's it, you're considered black, no matter what. And I think that that's interesting because we are placing at the center whiteness. And when we look at whiteness as the center of everything, anything that fits into that spectrum or is closest to whiteness is considered greatness, is considered power, is considered like the makers and the movers of who's going to dictate who gets the piece of that pie. Right, when I talk about piece of the pie is wealth, right? And I think that capitalism has stemmed from all of that. And I think that capitalism has grown through racism, right? Through that racial inequity that has been placed upon us, right? Because capitalism tells you who are the movers and shakers, who really dictates what's acceptable or not. For example, when you look at the TV show, when you look at Univision, all you see is European featured Mexicans. They're everyone in Univision, everyone you see on TV, anything closest to whiteness is acceptable, is seen as powerful, is seen as professional, is seen as all of these things. So when we think about it like that, we start to realize that racism is like embedded into our very fabric of everything that we do. Absolutely everything.
What do you feel needs to change on a practical, cultural, political, economic level?
Yeah, I think there has to be a lot to change. And I fully, truly believe that if we do not really resolve racial equity, nothing else is going to be right. I think that's at the root of all evil. When I talk about sexism, when I talk about ableism, when I talk about all these things, if we do not look at racial issues as the issue of the world, of something that we need to look at as a human race, as a human society, to really look at race in a way that's really impacting us, I don't think there's anything else out there. For example, I think that there's a loss of humanity when you can literally say that another person is less than another person. And I think that's ridiculous. When you go to any country, in the world, there's a huge racial inequity. And I think that the fact that that's in place, that exists within itself, to me, I think that's inhumane. Like, that's literally, it's not human.
Okay. Yeah. No, yeah, and I agree.
Like when I think about businesses too, like how are we going to grow if we're trying to mimic what's been in place before, right? We really have to separate ourselves and say, all right, this is how we see the world. This is how, we think from the heart. We think from our gut, right? And then I think that when we think about supremacist values, is a lot of thought from here, from heaven. From when you think about Catholicism, you think about how it's all up here. But then when you think about the African roots, you think about rooted, you think about earth, you think about that connection to natural resources. So I think that there's a huge separation there, that we are forgetting to think with our heart, to think with our souls, that it really impacts how we look at business, capitalism, and what really matters in the world. I don't know. I keep thinking about that because that has to be it. Like, I don't know. I just...
Okay.
I know that's too deep. That's too crazy.
I mean, I don't think so. I don't think it's too deep. I mean, it's definitely deep. I don't think it's crazy. I think that there's definitely a lot of truth into that. I'm not an expert at, let's say, whether the European culture identifies more with their
like
logical mind,
yes,
and like African or other continental races identify more with their spiritual, like, emotional,
like rooted, like reality, like what's in front of us.
I mean, it could also be a factor of like, I don't know,
it's so
Europeans growing up and evolving through cold temperatures, or and African and other peoples from that growing up in more warmer, and maybe that also rooted these various races into their core psychology, and that has just kind of went down throughout the years.
Whoa. But I don't know. There's a reason why we feel it. I think that there's a reason why we feel this way. We feel something and we haven't been able to put into words what it is. We feel it, but for us, what only makes sense to everyone is if we put it into words. And I think we haven't been able to put it into words what exactly that is. But I agree with you because you know that people of color are more likely to go through seasonal depression. Did you know that? So, okay, so I read this article that spoke about how people of color need the sun. Like, that's just part of how we function. And when we are not exposed to enough sun, there's something called seasonal depression where the colder weathers come around, that there's our feelings of like, you just feel like staying in, it's just a whole different feeling that you're going through. So seasonal depression is a real situation, a real thing in cold weather. So it's so interesting that you mentioned that about cold weathers and warm weather and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, because our DNA is a big part of who we are, and a lot of that is rooted in not only our biology, but also our hardwiring in regards to our psychology.
Yeah.
But let's dig a little deeper into Dominican people.
Yes.
Blackness with Dominican people. What are your thoughts on that? In regards to, so like, if somebody... Because now, I think when it comes to blackness, I like to differentiate who you're talking about.
Okay.
Because you can have a really dark-skinned Dominican, but you can have somebody who's dark-skinned, but they're African-American, or maybe they're Jamaican. So there's a whole variety, right? So now, because I feel like the lines get blurred based on your ethnicity. Your ethnicity?
Yeah.
I'm over here. Ethnicity? All right. You know what I'm saying? So, I gotta be more serious.
No, this one makes it fun. So you're good.
Alright. So, for the average, I'm gonna say black as African American person, who were to come to you and be like, I don't know, let's see, do you feel like you're black? Or like, yeah, let's just stay with that. Or you as an individual and Dominicans as a collective. Let's go deeper into that conversation.
Yes, when you think about our culture, when you look at the Minikin culture, when you're thinking about the arroz, the habichuela, everything, merengue, like perico ripiao, everything is black. That's all blackness. Our entire culture is black. And I think that that's so important for us to state that, because we got to think about blackness as a black diaspora and how blackness trickled into into the Caribbean, into Latin America. It created it became its own thing. Like when you go to Puerto Rico, there's salsa, right? When you go to Cuba, there's salsa. But in all of that, there's rumba, there's all of these things that really did stem from the African influence. And I think that when you put that in the center of it all, it's so important and valuable. I think what the problem is that a lot of when you talk about colonizers, they really do appreciate the culture, not appreciate it, they like to consume it. But I think when you put it at the forefront, I don't think the people that are supposed to really be celebrated are being celebrated. Like, if you go to Brazil, the vision that they created in Brazil is they have a lot of African influence, and when you get off the airplane, you see a lot of vision of women in carnival attire. Like, that's what attracts people. But when you look at Brazil, the people that are on top, that are managing the money and are the movers and the shakers, and with corporations and all of that, are all white Brazilians, right? So when we look at the world and we look at how people are consuming blackness, we're all consuming blackness, but it's not at the forefront or at the center or respected how it should be.
No, yeah, and I agree. And again, I've diven deep into this body of discussion, research topic, and I've come to the conclusion where it's like, my lens is economic. I think that's at the core of all of this, and so that's kind of really my day-to-day mission, really growing our economic power, and I feel like that starts with me.
That's awesome.
You know what I'm saying? Yes, so I'm focused on getting this money, All right, but that's for more. It's more of like an economic justice kind of mindset. So I grow rich, everybody around me grows rich, my community goes rich, and then expands from there.
Yeah, but you even thinking that way is already it pays homage to how I think people of color think, right? How you're looking to grow everyone around you. And I don't think that that's how others may see it. Like those who are in corporate, who own the railroad system, who own the MTA system, which I don't think that's how they think, right? So you're bringing a whole new twist with being a person of color, that you're thinking that way, that you're thinking, I want to grow my community, the people around me, I want to support them, right? That already within itself, I think, is powerful and revolutionary.
You already know.
Amazing.
What are your thoughts on this whole term, people of color?
Yeah.
Because I've heard a lot of, okay.
No,
sure,
tell me what you heard.
Talk to me about that. Why you hate it?
Yeah, I don't like people of color because I think that we're so much more than that. And I think that there's this thing that people say, oh, people of color. But what they're trying to say is black people. And when you look at black women, they're the most disrespected identity ever. And when I think about Malcolm X and what he said and everything that he has brought forefront, I really do think that there's something that we need to really do and concentrate on how we use language, because it's really impacted us in so many ways. Like, I don't even know, sometimes I even think about me being Latina. I'm like, I'm Latina, but I don't really identify too much with the immigrant struggle, right? I identify more with the black struggle as a Dominicana from Dominican Republic, because we're so synchronized and so embedded with blackness. So I think that for me, sometimes I feel a huge disconnect. I'm like, yes, Latinx, yes. But also I'm like, but I'm Caribbean. I'm in the Caribbean. The whole experience is different. Like the way that I see it, I don't know. It's so weird. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, yeah, I've never thought of that, but yeah, I've always identified more with, because, you know, everybody I grew up with was either Dominican, African-American, Jamaican, or Puerto Rican. And then it was just all blurred lines, you know, as a child and growing up. But then as you get older, you can become, you know, maybe you go to college or something, and you're like, oh, like, there's differences here.
Yeah.
You know, but, yeah, anyways. Let's see. You mentioned identity, and are you familiar with this person named Jordan Peterson?
I'm not. I don't know who Jordan Peterson is.
Interesting. I would recommend for you to look into that person. So he talks about, also he's more of a conservative, right? So throughout all of this research, I also delved into the conservative side of this whole argument, conversation, not really in regards to blackness, but just in regards to politics. Right? And in relation to identity.
Okay.
You know, they refer to it as identity politics.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
What is that? Can you tell me a little bit?
So, again, I'm not an expert at this, so it's just really surface
so
level.
what you understood from that?
Yeah, this is all surface level. So, from my understanding, they're describing identity politics as you identifying yourself as black or gay or an immigrant or whatever you identify yourself as, and you're basing all of your political, I guess, power and force in that specific direction. And if you hear anything to the contrary of your struggle or anything, in regards to the media, you immediately give backlash to that thing, regardless of its maybe political or economic soundness.
Oh, okay.
You follow me? So, like,
yes,
let's say
absolutely.
It could be a policy or a law that's being considered that may actually benefit you, or that actually has a lot of logic and reasoning behind it, but because maybe there has been some type of media or following around it not being super aligned with your identity, instead of the average person being diving deeper into it and I guess being logical about the whole approach, they immediately become emotional
Okay.
and wanting to create a movement of backlash against it. So, for example, I guess, like, let's say a speaker, like, the Donald Trump,
Yes.
or this person named Donald Trump,
Cool.
he brought into his cabinet that got booted out. Completely forgot. But anyways, so let's say it's just like a speaker who is controversial, things of that nature, so people form reports as to not give voice to that person.
Okay.
Which is understandable. Like, it has a logical reasoning as to why that would happen. But like, from their viewpoint, it's like you're not allowing dialogue to occur between two different opposing parties, which is counter to us moving forward. So instead of us having dialogue and people from different sides of the political spectrum coming in and conversing and giving speeches, it's like it's an immediate protest and get out of, you're not coming into the college and you're not gonna brainwash us or stuff like that, instead of engaging in dialogue. So that's kind of like the whole, my big summary about all of that.
What that is.
Which is, again, surface level.
Of course.
And you already saw me stumbling there.
No, you're good.
But yeah, so that's that.
Okay. So, so do you have a question for that, or do you want me to just get into what I think about
Yeah, sure.
that?
What are your thoughts? Yeah.
Okay, so when I think about privilege, when you think about privilege and power and all of that, one thing that we have to understand is that power and having privilege is very difficult for you to see the experience of others, right? For example, I'm not going to think about wheelchair accessibility and who has access to what or what they may be going through, because I myself do not go through that. Like, I myself am able-bodied, so I'm capable of doing what I need to do. So when I think about whiteness, when I think about that identity, I think that there's it's been categorized, it's been proven to be where the money is, where the power is, where the influence is, and I think that there's a incapability of seeing the struggle of others. So when you say economic plan and how that may benefit, I think that if it's not presented with the lens of other people of color or of people that identify outside of whiteness, I don't think that there will be any respect there or dialogue when you're not thinking in that way. So when you think about the years of oppression, when you think about everything that has happened, it's very difficult to really see that experience and note it as that. I always think about the Black Panther movement, and I always think about how these incredible leaders were executed, right? So it's very difficult for me to look at, other people that may not have us in mind, or even mention or put it at the forefront and tell us exactly how that economic plan or whatever is going to impact us, then I think it's very difficult as someone that understands the pain and the struggle throughout all those years. It's very difficult to have dialogue, because now there's this idea of, we got to tame these people. Like, we got to control this. This is not how we have dialogue. Let's have dialogue when you recognize that racism is at the center of everything. That if we do not fix racial equity, if we don't have that support, then I'm sorry, this dialogue cannot continue. Like I said, I really do believe that racial equity is at the center of all pain, of all issues that we have in the world. All of it. How is it that every single country in the world has this idea that blackness is horrible, is terrible, and to walk away from it? That to me is inhumane, and that to me is at the center of everything. But that's my personal values, right? So I understand how economic pursuance, moving forward together, yeah, cool, but that's not everything, right? Because let's think about pharmacy and how so many people are not able to pay for healthcare, and you're telling me that we're supposed to support that? Or that education, how much money we have to pay to go actually get an education, you're telling me that y'all came up with that and that's what works for y'all, but it doesn't work for us, right? I don't think that there's ever been a moment that people of color have been at the center of any plan or any dialogue or any thought. So I think it's difficult, right? Yes, we can have dialogue, but let's recognize the real issues here too. I got to pay too much.
No. I was good. No, I think you're on point with everything you're saying. The way I look at it, I definitely look at it on a very economic
center point.
Yeah. That's just me, But I think it's important for everybody to have their own specific thing that they're working towards and improving if they're gonna be in this, in essence, social justice movement, right? Because there's so many. I was at a BMI conference for CUNY a few weeks ago, Black Male Initiative. They brought in Talib Kweli and Sean King and a few other speakers. And Sean King, I've never met him. I've never really honestly, never really followed him for that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But
I know who that is.
Yeah, but they were speaking facts. Like, for example, there was this one girl who asked him a question about she's conflicted in regards to what path she should be choosing in regards to her and her social justice work. Yeah. Whether, because she identifies as an immigrant, but she also cares about blackness and the Afro-Latina identity issue, about advancing blackness and equity and racial equity in that sense, right? And he was like, yo, you're going to have to choose one.
Oh, wow.
You're going to have to choose one because, obviously you could dabble, but you're gonna need to put most of your energy into one. Because if not, you're always going to be, because there's so many different types of social justice. You could be environmental justice. There's so many things happening in regards to that needs to be improved upon within society that, in essence, if we're going to be going on this journey, we need to specialize in one area in order to be actually effective.
Wow.
Right?
That's powerful.
Yeah, and I already know, for me, it's economic.
Yeah, economic equity. That's awesome.
Off the back, right? Okay.
That is very interesting that you mentioned that, because I think about all the things that I'm very passionate about, and I think that the Haitian and Dominican struggle, I think, is something that speaks to my soul completely, because I think that demonstrates to me that it's a huge issue. That's something that I am going to fight until forever, until the rest of me is not in this world. That's how passionate I feel about that, because growing up and not, my dad is not really appreciative of me going natural and wearing my hair this way or even cutting my hair. So I think that for me, it's so embedded in that fabric of, the Dominican issue and the Dominican struggle, where they feel like, a lot of Dominicans feel like, nah, I'm Spain. I'm from Spain. My ancestors are from Spain. And it's like, okay, yeah, but your culture, everything you are is literally attributed to blackness, to African, to our African ancestry. So I think about that struggle and how a lot of Haitians lost their citizenship in Dominican Republic after years of being in that country. And I think once we can literally physically actually see how racism impacts a whole island, a whole nation. That separation to me is incredible.
Yeah, and it's crazy because that's the first island that all of this started from, right? Right. Can you talk to us a little bit more about your natural hair journey, because that's trending.
Yes, and I think I want to be very careful with signaling women that wear their natural hair as women that are woke, or women that are out there in the struggle and protesting. Absolutely not. I think that I love that there are many different type of women that do it completely different reasons. Some may do it because they feel comfortable. And I think for me, it felt liberating cutting off all my hair and stopping to go to Dominican hair salons because unfortunately, they're really good at killing these curls. And I think that when I was perming my hair and straightening it all the time, my hair was very thin and it was unnatural. Like one drop of water, my hair would just poof up. So I knew that was so unnatural that I had to live like that I had to really think about where I would stand in certain areas so I wouldn't mess up my perm. Like it's a huge struggle. And then hearing the Dominican,
I feel you, girl.
You have so much hair. You
know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
So I think I grew up I was very insecure about my hair growing up too because I would go to the Dominican hair salon and she'll be like, nah, we need to perm this hair. Like the Dominican woman
Hold on.
I swear to you, they're like, ay, este cabello está demasiado insoportable.
No, facts.
Tenemos que desenredar. Like it was bad.
And
I would hear
that.
them. Okay.
Let me stop.
Right. And I think that was very intense of them to do that, right? To kind of like signal like, yeah, this hair is bad. This is bad hair. That's all I grew up listening to. Like, that's bad hair. And I think that when I decided to go natural, it was a revolutionary act because I was like, no, I'm going to embrace who I truly am. And when I look at my grandfather, who's dark-skinned Dominican man, I think about how I'm paying respect to that. I'm paying respect to who he is, even when he's not here in this earth with us anymore. But I think that he left something behind, right? And although my dad wants to erase that part, I think for me it's truly powerful that I was like, nah, I feel liberated. I feel like I am myself with my hair this way. So, yeah, it's been a struggle.
So, disclaimer to the audience, we went to high school.
Yes.
Yeah, and this whole hair conversation.
Yes.
Leads me to remember.
What do you remember?
No, I remember, despite the fact that I'm bald right now.
Yes, you had a lot of hair.
Yeah, I had a lot of hair.
Point.
Yeah.
And we used to make fun.
They used to make fun of me. They were not my friends.
We were ignorant, okay? We were very ignorant.
But you know what? Me? I ain't give a fuck. I was living my best life.
You never cared. So I have to say something about that because I was thinking about that. How we would make fun of you for wearing your hair as a fro. And you were like, you did not care, but we used to really bully you about your hair.
Try to roast me.
We were roasting you the whole time, but you were just like, whatever. And I remember that you brought us to Central Park one time. Because there was you brought a bunch of, all of us, came to you.
Yeah,
and there was someone that was at the park and they were talking about really expanding your mind to think differently and stuff like that. So I will say that you really, looking back, you were way beyond your years. Like you were way ahead.
You already know. You already know.
Why did I say that? And you really got us thinking about how society is a certain way. And I had no idea. I was really blinded. I used to hate myself because my hair didn't straighten enough or something like that.
A day in the life.
Yeah, I will never forget that. Like, you really changed our lives.
It happens.
We were a bunch of little kids following you to Central Park. Like, hey, we got to Central Park.
You know what I'm saying?
And this person was over here like, no, you need to listen to this guy. He's preaching facts. Like, we got to go see him. And we went with you.
I remember that day. That guy was super weird, though. Nah.
He was weird, but he was saying
he was on a whole nother level of spirituality though.
Incredible. And I think we need to remove that weird word because think about it. He's probably he sees the world like he's at peace with the world. Like he's literally at peace with the world. Yeah, he's
at a whole nother level of consciousness. I remember
Amazing,
that.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll never forget that. But yes, we did used to make fun of you. And I think that attributes to all racism, to everything.
I used to go home and cry.
No way.
No, I'm fucking
okay. Yo, if that was true, I would have been sad, yo.
Nah. I remember I used to have braids on top of that. I used to like my braids. Mm-hmm. But then I cut that and then I regrew my hair. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up dropping out of high school.
You did, yes.
But we don't got to go into all of that.
But I think it's because you were literally experiencing something that none of us understood. And I think that that's us not supporting you throughout that time that you were going through that.
I had a spiritual awakening.
Yes, exactly.
And
you were the only person to do, and look what you're doing now. So I think this is incredible.
it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean?
Yes. Ooh, a mess. Thank
Yo.
you for having me here. And I also want to clarify something that I am an immigrant and I do identify with the immigrant struggle, but I don't identify with the immigrant struggle with the South American experience. You know what I'm saying? And I think about, when I think about our Caribbean struggles and I think about Cuba and I think about how, I don't know if you know about Cuba, but when Fidel came into power, a lot of the white Cubans came to the United States and they were received with open arms. And when the darker skinned Cubans came to the United States, they were not received with open arms when they were literally leaving that country as refugees for support. So when I think about that, I think about how incredibly different our struggles are. It's just different. I think that anything that that embodies that, I think, is important for us to know.
No, I think I definitely researched that entire topic as well.
That's awesome.
And I know a lot less about a lot of South American countries, to be honest. And it's probably more because, just quite honestly, I care more about the Caribbean thing,
Right.
because that's kind of where I'm from.
Caribbean struggle is different.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and there's still, I mean, I'm know for a fact there's a lot of things that I'm still very ignorant about, especially when it comes to history.
Me too.
Right, but I'm always willing to learn. Where would you recommend the average person maybe listening to this right now to learn more about all of these topics?
Yeah, I think that we need to start looking at whose books we're reading and really looking at what their philosophies are. I would start by reading about I have a couple of books that I have in my home, but I don't remember too much of their names. But what I can do is provide them to you so that you can include it in the credit section or in your YouTube section, because I can't think of them right now.
Nah, that's cool. Actually, there's this series called.
What series?
I'm gonna have to include it in the link below because I don't remember it. I know it's called.
Is it like a documentary where someone is walking around and?
Nah, I've seen that one.
Okay.
Nah, that was dope. I know what you're talking about. It's like the guy, right?
Yeah.
Now that's not that. It's Hidden Colors.
Okay. Hidden Colors?
Yes, it's like a 5-part documentary series. I've only watched half of one, but I know that it's very insightful in regards to. I know it really goes into like specifically African history and how that expands throughout the world and how everything is connected through that.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's funny you say that because when we need to also remember, like when we're doing our research, that we need to stop centering African history around slavery, because that's just a part of it. Like that's just something that happened, but that is not African history. And I think that education has failed our students by starting the history of African descendancy through that. Like that really convoluted our brain. Like that's how we think about African history is the beginning of slavery. Like that was the beginning of life. When there were scientists, there were writers, they were everything before all of that. So
I think us as being Dominicans, not only do we tend to be of lighter skin, but apart from that, we know where at least our cultural origin stems from, at least from generations.
Yeah.
And African Americans don't have that at all. And I think that's something very interesting or noteworthy.
There's a huge separation.
And I think I think it's a consciousness. I think the whole race issue throughout the world is a consciousness issue. It's a self-valuation, self-identification issue. It's all of that. So like I feel like if the world and all of these populations throughout the world were to become more educated on their self and their history, Africa and in essence, it sounds corny or like, you know, what's this word called? Hippie-ish, but like loving yourself. You know, like really loving yourself, and because that's the, one of my best friends is Dominican, dark-skinned Dominican. If you saw him, you'd think he was like Wiz Khalifa. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Raj, you already know, yeah? Alright, anyways, if you already know. Alright.
But I want to say that I think that Dominicans are black. We're just Spanish-speaking black people. That's just what it is. And I think that we also need to recognize that more than 70% of our country is black. Like, yes, a lot of us are light-skinned and stuff, but most Dominicans are black. And I just need to point that out because that's just what it is.
Yeah, I think blackness is a spectrum. You know?
Yes, but I don't think the United States sees it that way. The United States sees it as the one drop rule. Like, that's just what it is.
I think the United States does sees it as that. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I think it's like as soon as you're like a few shades darker and forward, it's like you're getting viewed at differently immediately because because now European Americans, things of that nature, they're not identifying you as one of them. Yeah. And as soon as that disassociation happens, it's like, oh, you're part of the non-white crowd. So that's kind of what I feel like. That's kind of what happens. But I feel like there just needs to be a bunch of, and I think I think all of this is most likely gonna change in the very near future in an accelerated rate because of the internet, because of a lot of these countries in Africa. And throughout the world, getting access to the internet and through just YouTube alone and Google, everybody's going to start becoming more knowledgeable about all of these things, which are going to be cause change in regards to the racial side of all of this situation. I think, you know, as long as the environment doesn't fuck us up completely and we all fucking, you know,
we got to take care of the earth.
Be on some Armageddon shit.
Oh my god.
On some real shit, cause that's that's you know that's where we're heading, I guess. But you know, as long as none of that, or at least we come out, you know, come out of that successfully, I think the world's gonna be a much better place moving forward. That's my thoughts. Let's end it on a good note.
Yes.
You already know.
Yes, let's end it on a good note. I think we had a great conversation. Thank you.
Facts. I think anybody viewing this right now is definitely either they're gonna learn a lot of things or be refreshed about a lot of things or gain another different perspective, and I think all of that is important. Yeah. Yo, so thank you for coming on the show.
Of course, thank you for having me, and I wish you luck. I hope this is viewed many times.
You already know. Yeah. Trending.
Okay. All right.
Woo! All right. Yeah.